Hello, and welcome to Women and Blended Families. This is our January conversation of 2024. I'm so excited about the first live stream of the year. And if you haven't joined us before, we're live the second Tuesday of every month at 3 p.m. Central Time. And this month, we are live on Instagram for the first time. So, welcome to our Instagram viewers as well as our Facebook viewers. Today, we're going to talk about how to create strong step-family relationships that go the distance. It's the beginning of a brand new year, and maybe you're thinking about how you'd like to have more harmony in your home or how to create better relationships with your stepchildren. Maybe you've even wrestled with God about doubts or unanswered questions that surround your step-family circumstances. Our guest today, Laurie Polich, can give us insight on those subjects. And if you have questions as we go along, feel free to put them in the chat. If we don't get to yours during the live stream, we will answer them later. But before we start, I want to hear from you in the comments. First off, I want to know where you're from, but I also want to know, do you have snow on the ground where you live? Or do you have predictions of snow in your forecast? If you do, I would love to hear about it. You have a couple of inches, you have 6 inches. I know there is snow in several parts of the country, but we are in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we don't see snow very often here. And so sometimes we just want to know where other people are and what kind of snow you have so that if we decide we want to visit during a snowy season, we know where to come. So throw that up in the comments because it's always fun to see where people are joining us in our conversation. Sacramento, California, no snow. Yeah, I know. You probably never get snow in Sacramento. But I talked to my sister just this morning who is in Bettendorf, Iowa, and they have snow. They have 6 inches at this point with more snow on the way. And so I know there are some of you out there that have snow. Also, be sure to tag a friend who you know would benefit from our conversation. Even if they can't join us now, they can always watch the recorded version later. So if you know somebody that this would be helpful for them, go ahead and tag them in the comments so that they can be notified also. All right, let's see. Where else do we have people joining us? And do you have snow? Houston, Texas, no snow. Oh, yeah, that's a bummer. I kind of doubt Houston ever gets much snow, but surely there's somebody out there that has some snow. Put it in the comments for us. Florida, no snow, just a windstorm. Yeah, no snow in the Caribbean. Wow. Well, there's other kinds of beautiful weather there. Wisconsin, 5 inches. Okay. Yep. I can imagine that and probably more to come. Well, y'all can keep throwing that up in the comments, and I'm going to bring our guest on while we continue to watch about your weather. But our guest today is Laurie Polich Short. She is a speaker, an author, a wife, and a stepmom. She's a graduate of Fuller Theological Seminary, and she has served on staff with 4 churches over the last 30 years. She's the author of 5 books, and 2 of them we're going to talk about today: Grace-Filled Step Parenting and also Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you, Gayla. And there's no snow here. I'm in Santa Barbara, California.
I was going to ask you about that. I knew you were in California, and I figured there was no snow where you're at.
However, I was just in Idaho, and there's lots of snow up there.
Oh, is there really? Wow.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
does it kind of scare you to drive in it since you live in a place with no snow?
There wasn't enough to scare me, but yes, I know it can be scary, especially for us Californians who are not.
Yeah, we're kind of like that too. When we live in the South, we don't get enough snow to really feel comfortable driving on it. So it still kind of scares me. But we get more ice than snow sometimes, and ice is horrible. So
Right.
yeah, I see a little bit other Indiana, no snow, just rain. So, well, Laurie, let's get started. I know that our viewers can really benefit from conversation with you, and I want to talk about creating strong step-family relationships that go the distance. So when you married, you didn't have biological children of your own, correct?
No, I never have had biological children.
Okay.
So yeah.
So were you surprised at the challenges that you came upon as a new stepmom?
Honestly, I went into the marriage knowing that I was marrying 2 people. I was marrying my husband and his little boy, but maybe the surprise came with all the other people I was marrying that I didn't know I was marrying that day.
Okay.
I think if, future step parents could actually see the picture of all the people that they are pledging themselves to,
Right,
it
right.
might be a
Mhm.
little less romantic, but a little more realistic.
Uh-huh.
And it varies so much from it completely varies from situation to situation. In my situation, I did not have previous children. However, my husband was married to someone who did have children before he married her, and so he was a stepdad as well as a biological dad.
Okay.
And those relationships have also entered our lives, which has been a huge joy. But all of those relationships create challenge.
Mhm.
And I think because I was a stepchild later in life, my dad remarried someone that was 3 years older than me. And so I had the experience of being the child, even though I was an adult, in a
Wow.
situation that I didn't choose,
Mhm.
and then came to absolutely adore her later on. They've been married almost 40 years now.
Wow.
And she is lovely and wonderful and has been a huge addition to our family. But as you can imagine, when it first happened,
Mhm.
it was really hard for
Mhm.
me. And
Mhm.
so, with that perspective, I think God gave me a lot of insight going in. However, you are never fully prepared for
That is
all the
so
things.
Mhm, mhm.
So,
Yeah, that is so true, and part of what I hear you saying is the more that we can know before we go in, we can begin to adjust our expectations because I have found that that can be one of the hardest things is we have expectations walking in, especially if we have been divorced and this is a remarriage and we really want some new beginnings that are meaningful and I like to say I had this white picket fence around my house that
mhm.
things were just gonna be charming, and things weren't all charming when
Yeah.
I walked into a step family.
That's right, and I think, the pictures are even more they're cuter when 2
Mhm.
people come together and and you see all the children and ours was absolutely angelic, and so you just see these people coming together but then you move from the marriage and the pictures into real life, and
Right,
that is where you have so many both decisions, non-decisions that come upon you, and stresses outside of your marriage to deal with. And all of those things are going to impact you. But I think that that's where I am such a believer in the long view
yes, me too.
and
Uh-huh.
and that, what it looks like right now is not always gonna be the way it looks,
Right,
and that the things that you're doing right now will impact a future
right,
with your stepchildren, so
right, and just because it's not where you want it to be right now, doesn't mean that that's how it's gonna be forever, and so that is where the value of the long view really can play in.
absolutely.
And something else you talk about is successful step parenting starts with a strong marriage.
Mm,
And I agree. I would say, and really, a successful step family starts with a strong marriage. So whether you're the bio parent or you're the step parent, uniting as a team can make such a difference. Talk to us about that a little bit and what you've learned.
yes, I believe that so much because a second marriage or, a step family situation puts a pressure on a marriage that you don't get when you're
Mhm.
first coming together with someone for the first time.
Right,
And yet, in some ways, you can look at it. A different perspective is that you are going to encounter a lot of the stress of life that couples will eventually encounter in their lives. You just get to encounter it all the next day after your honeymoon. And so in a sense, if you can weather that first couple of years together as a couple, you have a really good shot at making it. It's just that people are faced with so much that they feel like I can't do
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
And I really do think that your marriage is a place where you have to invest and you have to be very intentional because you have a child or children. And so you're going to have to make time for that,
Right.
and
Mhm.
that's right away. You've got to make time for date nights and conversation, and communication is so important, and listening to each other. And the biological parent has to listen to the step parent and
Right.
vice
Mhm.
versa.
Right.
So I think if you're going at it as a team, you are going to have so much more, um, I would say, both grace as well as longevity in your situation. I really do think that.
Yeah, and you mentioned going out on dates. I think sometimes
Hmm.
that can get lost sometimes,
It
but
does.
that is a huge way to continue
Hmm.
to really stay connected with your spouse. And we learned to put some boundaries around our date nights, even that we weren't going to talk about the kids. We weren't going to talk about the ex spouse. We were going to focus on us, our dreams, where we were headed.
Hmm.
All those conversations can of the kids and schedules and former spouses, those can take place in your home when you're doing life. But if you schedule a date night, I think it's really good to focus on the relationship and moving forward in that relationship.
And the romance that you don't
Mhm.
always have as much
Exactly.
time for. I will say another added maybe piece of advice for someone out there is that we were very intentional about our babysitters as well.
Oh, okay.
And we happen to live near Westmont College, which is a Christian college, but inevitably through your church or somewhere
Hmm.
around you,
Right.
there are always great people that
Hmm.
are looking for some money to babysit. And so we had a couple of people in Jordan's life that became very special to him. And he
Oh,
looked forward to our date nights as
wow.
we did because he loved his Katie and Rebecca who would come and make the night so special for him. So
Mhm.
that's just a little bit of an added, maybe piece of advice for some of you that are dealing with that. It's not a putting off the children, it's making it special for them too.
Yeah, and that helps us if we are feeling guilty about leaving our kids to go
Yeah.
out, because especially in the early years, they may not like that if the kids are young, and that can tug
Mhm.
on a mom's heart. And
Mhm.
but just like you've done, that's a wise investment that you make, and a way to really find consistent babysitters for
Yes.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it takes a village.
Mhm.
So the community around your family is going to be as intentional as you two are
Right.
going to be. And that was huge in our life as well. It was the I was very intentional on the community around
Yes,
Jordan
right,
raising.
right. Yeah, and something else you talk about is how step parenting is a calling. I don't think we always look at it as a calling. So I would love to hear you expound on that a little bit. How do we change our perspective if we don't see it that way?
Well, I think that in particular, people who have faith can walk into this situation as they should every situation to say, you are beyond your actual situation. You are called to be a presence in this child's life.
Right,
Um, like it or not, when you marry a spouse with children, you are called not only to your spouse, but you are called to have some role of influence in your
right,
child's life. And maybe it was because I was a former youth pastor before I became a stepmom, but I really looked at this in that way because it varies from situation to situation how much influence and what your relationship will look like. But
right.
if you feel a calling, then that's beyond
Mm,
whatever you're going to get back in the situation, because we
right.
all know that our callings in ministry, we don't know what we're going to get back.
Hmm.
And you don't know as a step parent. Now, I maintain that later in life, the person you are, no matter what role you have in the child's life, the person you are, ultimately, that child will see as that
Right,
child becomes an adult.
right.
It's not going to be about your role. It's going to be about who you are. And I think that that is so important when you are making decisions in the day to day that are
Right.
so hard and challenging.
Right, right. And along with that kind of goes where you say also to embrace the opportunity to influence, be an influence in your
Hmm.
stepchild's life, which is
Yeah.
exactly what you have just said. And we can be an influence in a way that nobody else can be. We bring
Absolutely.
different things to the picture even than what a biological parent brings in, and that is huge in
It is.
regards to a stepchild.
It is. And as you know, in any ministry position that you occupy, whether it's volunteer or professional, you know that you are having a huge influence on the person that you are in relationship with. And so I think that helps because
Mhm.
it gives you a deeper sense of what you're doing instead of feeling like an add-on or a
Right,
babysitter or you're
right.
just filling in or I have no voice here,
Mhm,
but you have your presence
mhm.
and you would be surprised how much children are picking up on your presence. And it's not about being perfect. I just want to make sure I say that because
Mm,
I think what it's about is keeping short accounts, being honest, and being able to say you're sorry when you are frustrated, which you will be,
mhm,
but letting your child see who you are.
mhm.
And especially if you have a relationship with God, they're going to see that much more in what you do than what you say.
Right, exactly. We've had a question come in, Lori. So one of our viewers says, dates are really hard when the biological parent gets limited time with the children
Hmm.
in the other home. How would you help someone in that situation?
Yes. Well, I think, like I said, every situation is different, and we did not have to deal with that. I think if your time is limited, and of course, especially if you have children and they're at different times, that makes it the most tricky. So
Mhm,
then you're going to have to be creative about your dates and what they look like.
mhm.
And remember that this is just a period of time in your life. I think
Right.
that people feel like it's going to be like this forever, and you will be amazed how fast it went when
Yes.
it's done.
Yes,
You
and
know,
how much time you still have left
I
with your
know.
spouse,
I
and
know.
that goes back to, are we investing in our marriage and nurturing our marriage? Because this season of our step family, it doesn't last forever with these
That's right.
dynamics, and then we're
That's
left
right.
with our spouse, and
I
have you
know.
nurtured that marriage enough that you still want to be with them and spend time with them?
It totally. And it sounds, I mean, I know how hard this is to hear if you're in the middle of the trenches
Right.
because you feel like, the days are long, the years are short. That's what
Yes.
everybody says. And the days are long and there are times. So I guess one idea would be to the person who's struggling with having dates or time with their spouse is maybe you can look at it like finding a family that you click with
Hmm.
and make it a double date. So you
Right.
love the couple and they have children, and maybe your children can play while you are having some adult time.
Hmm.
Or maybe you're going to have a date in your home. You put a movie on for the kids, or just get an hour. I mean, it doesn't have to be what you picture what a date is supposed to look like. You
Right.
just have to spend time
Right.
with your spouse.
Yeah. Be creative. That's what I
Yeah.
hear you saying. Be
Yes.
creative.
Mhm.
Also say step parenting is hard, but it can
Mhm.
also be richly rewarding. I wonder if
Mhm.
you would share a reward that you have experienced in your step family.
Well, there are little rewards that I say in the book that you've got to take note of.
Mm,
I used to keep cards and pictures and things when he was little that he would do, and things I wanted to remember when he was a teenager, and it was a little harder. We have the situation where we actually raised him most of the time, and so I was a stepmom, but kind of the primary
mhm,
caregiver in this
right.
situation, and so um, the rich rewards, a lot of them have come. He's now 20. And I will say that he is more and more and more understanding
Oh,
his situation,
mhm,
who I was and am, and all of those things. And I know in some cases, if you don't have a great relationship with your stepchild, or they've put a lot on you that doesn't even belong to you because
mm.
they're just miserable with their situation and you
It's
are the
happened.
one that's
Mhm,
enduring this,
uh-huh,
again, I go back to the calling in the ministry. I mean, you have an opportunity as a step parent, and people don't usually talk about this, but you feel a lot of what Jesus felt
mhm,
at sometimes. And it's really endurance and realizing that it's not the child's fault for what they feel. They won't always feel that way. And if you can, as much as possible, just see yourself in the role you have with the time you have, to just do the best you can. And one day it will be seen. I really believe that. But do hold on to those small, tiny little victories that sometimes we forget about in light of the bigger pictures, the
Right.
harder things.
Right. I agree. Well, I want to kind of segue a little bit into your most recent book, Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing, because I think that in step families, it's not uncommon that we bump up against situations that maybe
Mhm,
just don't make sense to us. We're
mhm.
wrestling with whether God is really working in our lives. And you write about how to navigate the road we're on when God's plan is unclear. And the reality is that we are all going to wrestle with that from time to time, whether it's just slow relationship building in our step family, or maybe a defiant stepchild that we're
Yeah.
praying for and just we aren't seeing those answers. So, Laurie, one of the quotes that you say that I think really relates to this is sometimes we need to wait for more of the story to be revealed before we'll understand it. There is so much truth to that.
That's absolutely. I think, it's no accident that I wrote Grace-Filled Step Parenting just before I wrote Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing. I'm primarily a faith-based author,
Right?
but I felt called by God to write this book for step parents because I just felt like I understood now that I had been through this journey, that I really wanted to um, just impart whatever it was I had. And it's not just my advice, it's other people's advice, which I surveyed some other parents. But the themes that I have learned and lived are they were definitely the precursor to Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing.
Oh,
I
wow.
feel like timing is such a huge issue in
Hmm.
step parenting
Hmm.
because we look at our situation and we definitely feel on a daily basis this is the way it's going to be all the
Forever.
time.
Right.
And it's not just in step parenting that we do that. We do
Uh-huh.
that in life.
True.
And I
Hmm.
think that we feel like God's not hearing me, he's not answering my prayer, when in fact, he might very well have a plan to do that. It's just going to be later than you wanted. It's just going to look different than you wanted.
Hmm.
And so God is about us waiting so much in our lives. And the mystery of God's timing, and what I do in this book is I talk about some stories in scripture that I think can help us so much with some of the mysteries of how God works.
Hmm.
And timing is a huge, huge issue. I mean, beginning with Abraham and Sarah, who actually became the first blended family because they couldn't wait out God's timing. You
Exactly.
know,
And look what a mess they
I
made of
know.
it, right?
Yes. And it's not to say that all step families are a mess because we know as we've entered them, many of us are working towards making this situation right because
Exactly.
of a
Right.
situation that became broken. And I do believe that God really uses step families in children's lives
Hmm.
to heal and to bring things to children that they wouldn't have if people didn't come together. But I think in the case of God's timing, and I think in the case of step parenting, so often it's going to be I'm in the middle of the story right now. Even if I feel like it's going to be like this forever, it is not.
Right.
And you and I can tell younger stepmoms, it's not going to be like this forever. It's not. We are now on the other side of it. It will change. But the way you are right now, wherever you are in the story, will have an impact in how the story comes to fruition. And that is powerful because sometimes we're so frustrated or angry or upset or we're at the end of our rope that we make decisions in the middle of our story. And
Mhm.
so often that's what happens to step families is I just can't do this anymore.
Mm,
And
mhm.
then that will impact what happens. So endurance is huge,
Right.
perseverance is huge, and what you're learning. I think what you're learning from the situation, because I even have a chapter about this, is that step parenting is an inside job. And I think in my new book, I talk about how many times God is working on us and not just our situations. He's using our circumstances to do a work in us.
Right.
And so
Mhm.
sometimes the waiting period and the frustration and the longevity. I mean, I didn't marry until I was 49, and that is no girl's plan for their life.
Oh, exactly,
Nobody
right.
goes, "Oh, I hope I get married when I'm 49 years old," you know? In fact, when I share my testimony to college students, you can see them go to prayer. It's like, "Please, God, no." You know, they love my story, but, I only have a story because I married at 49.
Exactly,
And
right.
so the thing is that when God takes a long time, and, I always say that, timing doesn't mean the miracle isn't going to happen. It makes room for the miracle
Mhm.
because it's only when it's too late that a miracle can happen. And so I think that sometimes if you're in the middle of the story, you can give yourself encouragement by saying, "Gosh, God is weaving a story in my life. I know that because it's taking so long."
Right.
And one day, maybe I'll be talking about this on the other side,
Mhm.
and to always have that hope that God can do anything at any time. So,
And what he is teaching us in the meantime. I think that's the other thing that you touched on, and I do
yes.
believe that is part of waiting well, that when
Yes.
we don't see what is happening that we wish would happen, then
Right.
we can recognize that there is something God is wanting to teach us along the way, and are we open to it? Are we listening to it?
Right, right,
Mhm.
which is hard. It's hard to do, and especially when you're under duress, which so
Oh,
often step-parents
absolutely.
are.
Yes.
And give
Mhm,
yourself grace
mhm.
because, you're gonna need it, and you're not gonna do this perfectly, and it's okay. You need support. There's a lot of other step-parents out there that can offer
Absolutely.
great support.
Right, and, I just have to say, we can talk about this now because we
Mhm.
have walked this road, but, for myself, I can tell you I didn't do it perfectly, and so I have tried to learn things along the way that I can now share with others so they don't have to make the same
Right.
mistakes and learn things the hard way, which often happens with me, it seems like.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Yeah. Okay. We've had another question. Let's look at this a minute. I think it was pertaining to what we were talking about earlier. But she says, why would one feel as a step parent pushed to the side when my stepdaughter, 19 years old, wants to go out with just her dad, my
Mm.
husband, even though it's really once in a blue moon? It's not even all the time, but I wish I didn't feel left out whenever the stepchild wants time with just their other living biological parents.
Well, I can't speak to that having a son. I mean, that was a given in my situation. There were times when, of course, they would want to be together. These feelings, I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, so I don't know if you know anything about that, but it's basically I'm one giant feeling, like I have 0 filter. It just, I feel everything and then I think. And so I have a ton of feelings that are painful that I've gone through. I talk very openly about some of them in the book. Um, so be gentle with yourself. It's
Right.
okay that you feel it,
Yes.
and to say, I'm feeling kind of jealous. I wish I could be a part of it. I wish she wanted to be with me. There might come a day where she wants to just be with you. You don't
Exactly.
know what the end of the story is.
Right.
But remember that I think it's really important for kids to be able to be with one or the other parent in any situation.
Mhm, mhm.
And so I would say get a good friend when
I
that
would yes.
happens
Uh-huh.
and go out with them and
Mhm.
just spend some time with them. And
Yep.
I mean that
I was thinking the same thing, Lori. Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
and the other thing I would say is to recognize that the stepmom-stepdaughter relationship is often one of the most tenuous
Mhm.
relationships in a step family.
Yeah.
And so it's normal that it might take longer than we want
Yeah.
for the stepdaughter to warm up to the stepmom and
Yeah.
feel that let's just all go out together. It doesn't mean it won't happen
Right.
eventually, but she's just not ready. And
Right.
so, for one, be gentle with yourself. I love that. Recognize that it's normal. Continue to invest in the relationship in ways that you can that feel comfortable to you, but know how valuable it is that she have the one-on-one time with her dad. So I have to say kudos to this stepmom who recognizes the need and
Mm.
isn't trying to push her way in,
Mhm.
but also sees how it is affecting her. And
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
like I said, when you have feelings, they're just your feelings. They're
right.
absolutely legitimate. And that's where the support, I even talk in the book about, there's so often, so many times you're going to do things that nobody sees and nobody's congratulating you and nobody's saying, great job. You just, oh, that's
Mhm.
so you need your friends to do that. You just
Right.
tell them. That's what I did. I said, can I just tell you what I did today? Give
Yes.
you and my best friends, none of them are stepmoms, but they would say, oh my gosh, that is so great, and it's because sometimes we just need to hear that. I'm
We
making a
do.
big sacrifice. I'm letting my stepdaughter go out with her dad again, and I'm feeling kind of, and just be in that feeling and then let it go, because that's
Right.
that's the only way to take care of it.
Right. I remember when my teenage stepson would so easily say to his dad, I love you. Like if he was leaving the house for the day, I love you. And I remember thinking, I don't ever hear that quite so easily. It has to
Mm.
be, I'm going to say it first. But that has changed. I
Mm.
easily now, from my stepson and my stepdaughter here, I love you. And so again, that is part of the
Time.
story is still developing wherever the relationship is today is not where it's going to be 10 years from now, but we have input in that.
That's
We
right.
have a part to continue investing even when we're not getting back what we want. That's part of our role, and as you say, that's part of our calling
Yeah.
that we can embrace, and that makes it a little easier to do that.
And I would say if you do want some spiritual encouragement, the book Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing really carries some themes that are helpful in step
Mm,
parenting. Um, and maybe just as a quiet time in the morning. It's meant to be read devotionally, just in chunks, I think, because it leads you to a story in scripture and you get an insight, and you might not have even thought of that story in that
right,
way before. That's what I
right.
try to do with my books, is show people things in scripture that they might not have considered,
Hmm.
and that can be very helpful in the journey that you're on, when you're in the middle of the story, when you don't see what God is doing, when you're waiting, when you're in a hard season, to be able to see God in the hard season, and all of those things I think can be helpful in that book.
And there's some great biblical insights in there, Lori, some parallels where you draw from scripture that I think are very helpful as
Yeah.
as the book is read. One last question for you and we're going to wrap up.
Okay.
How can we learn to look at an unknown future and still anticipate God's faithfulness?
Well, I always say the best place to see God's faithfulness is the rearview mirror. And
Yes,
so it comes from looking back and deciding for yourself, has God been faithful in the past? What has
right,
God done in the past? What
right.
do I see that he's done? Maybe it took a long time. Maybe it was different than I thought. But to learn to look back, to know God's faithfulness, and then to look at your future and say, why would he stop being
Hmm.
faithful? Even though I don't know what he's going to do, I'm going to believe that he's going to do something. And I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be bigger. I always say that.
Right,
God's stories are always bigger than ours. So they involve other people, which means, your story is going to impact other stories, which means the hard things you go through are going to minister to other people, because
right.
God uses pain more than anything else in our life.
Yes,
So
sadly.
exactly. So the step parents that are struggling right now, God's going to use that. You're going to be able to encourage somebody else with your situation. And if we didn't go through it, we wouldn't know the way we know.
Right.
And so I just think that looking at your future, which is unknown, with hope instead of despair, because you know that your God is doing something bigger than you have in mind. It might be different than you
Right.
have in mind, but it's going to be bigger. And I, most of the time, think it's much better, much, much better. He writes such much better stories than me. And
Yes.
so when they come to fruition, I'm just always able to say, wow,
Hmm.
I can't believe it. So look at your future with that in mind. And if you're in the middle and you don't see, and it feels like it's been too long, I want to say congratulations that God is giving you a better story. And it's only through the longevity that you're going to get that. Otherwise, I'd never talk about my marriage if I got married in my 20s. I
Oh,
just wouldn't, because it'd be like, oh yeah, I got married at 25 and it was awesome. And I had my 2.5, whatever. It's never like what you want to happen. If that happens, it's not a story. You don't go to
right.
the movies to see everything go out perfectly. You go to the movies because you wonder, how is this all going to work out?
Exactly.
And so just hold on to God in it and look for him and ask him to show himself in your story.
Amen. Thank you for joining us, Lori. Your
Thank you for
ministry
having me.
is a blessing to many. And to our viewers, you'll find more information about Lori's books and her ministry and where you can find her in the comments. Thank you again. Ladies, make plans to join us next month for our February live stream on February the 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. Maybe you'll need a little encouragement for your marriage that day. We're going to talk about why and how to put our marriage in the front seat of our step family. Joining me will be Myrna Brown, stepmom to 4, wife to Stanley, who together they founded Blended Covenant Living to encourage blended family couples to celebrate the plan and purpose of marriage. So mark that on your calendar, February the 13th. Remember, you can always find us on the second Tuesday of each month at 3 p.m. Central, or watch the recorded version later. God bless you, ladies. Thank you for joining us. Psalm 18:25 tells us, to those who are faithful, God shows himself faithful. Keep pressing on. See you next time.